and welcome back to Old School. Today we're going to be in the spiritual and emotional classes, and our teacher is Darla Czeropski, author of Just Say Hello. Darla has served in a church most of her life as a children's minister, preschool director, youth leader, and living and working as a house parent for a home for battered and abused children. Despite the many opportunities Darla has experienced in life, it was only through trauma, bad choices, and divorce that God taught her how to be free. Darla founded Oh So Free Ministries for women 2 years ago after publishing her first book, Just Say Hello, Knock Down the Walls to Discover the One Relationship That Changes Everything. Her favorite pastimes are writing and making long-lasting relationships with women in Oh So Free Ministries, plus learning you are never too old to be a mom. She cares for her new granddaughter, whom she and her husband will adopt this year. Let's welcome Darla to class. Hi.
Hi, Michelle.
This is awesome because I have been a member of the Oh So Free community for a little while. I tell the story that 10 years ago, the Lord tapped me to write the book, and I pulled a Moses on him. Oh, yeah, I can't possibly be the one that you mean. My daughter is going to college to be a writer and an author. And I'm like, no, you picked the wrong one. Well, after battling and being disobedient and him finally wrangling me around, we got back on track. A year ago, actually maybe 2 years ago, in the spring, I joined Compel. I became part of a bunch of Compel communities. And then I started seeing other authors like yourself and Oh So Free and some other, I'm in just a ton of communities on social media, which I love. I love the input. I don't get to every post all the time, but I try to get in there and engage when I can. So this was awesome because the people I've gotten to meet and I've gotten to draw out and hear how their story, because I honestly believe that in a room of 100 women, they say only 50% if you look up statistics, but I'm going to say it's probably closer to 90 have walked some portion of my story, which contains abuse, which contains sexual abuse, which contains divorce, infidelity and all of that stuff. And the statistics out there are just too big for people not to have some connection in there. And so I feel the same way about your story. And I did get your book. Yay! So what I like to do, my intent in Old School is in mirroring my book. Now, my first book is going to be a memoir of the story of those abuses and things. And the second one is going to break down between the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical, how my recovery came about or how it was coming about as this all transpired. And I understand after looking into your book that you talk about the mechanisms and so forth for the same kind of traumas. So what I would like first is your story, and then we can kind of chat about how you walk that out in your book.
Okay. Well, it's funny how our similarities are the same in that writing our stories is helping us through the healing process. And I believe that, for me, it's writing and sharing. But I believe that it's through that process that God uses our pasts to bring about healing. Not saying that everyone should tell their story publicly. I always like to say that because it is not for everyone. But in my case, and it sounds like in your case, God is going to use that in your healing process and to help others. And I think that's wonderful. My story started, this is probably going to date me a little bit, but Leave It to Beaver. That is exactly what I feel like my family was growing up. We lived in the suburbs. My mom and dad were together at home raising us, and church was our life. We went on Sunday morning, Sunday evening, sometimes on Sunday afternoon for choir practice, Wednesday night. I grew up in church as a child, walking in the door, kicking my shoes off. It was like home because we loved serving and, being a part of the church family. And it wasn't until I was 4 years old that unknowingly, because you don't, when you're 4, you don't realize things are happening, but trauma crept into my life. My grandfather passed away, and it wasn't, I loved my grandfather. It wasn't that we had a unique relationship or anything. It was just the idea that he was gone, and where did he go? And back then, people didn't know, when they would tell you things, you have to be careful with children, how you say things. But in church, they would say, oh, God took him home. Oh, he's in a better place. Things like this, So because of my mind, and I have even as a young child, I was like a thinker, think all the time. And it really just totally rocked my world. I began to think that if God could take my grandfather home, then he could take my mother at any time. And I began to worry that he was going to take my mom. And even at 5 years old, going to kindergarten for the first time, I just barely could do it. I had so much anxiety. Anytime I was away from my mom, I'd wonder, is she gone? Has God taken her? And I grew up, and my parents thought, oh, wow, she's growing out of this, and but I didn't grow out of it. Because when we have trauma, we either push it down, but it always comes back as something else. If we have not walked through it to heal through it. And I've learned a lot about this in the last 2 years. But I just, had to go through that process, and God met me there. But I began to build up walls, and that's what my book's about. And we all do it, and we build up walls naturally to protect ourselves. But unfortunately, the walls also divide us from our relationships with other people. So it makes sense that it would also keep us from an intimate relationship with God. So I didn't understand all of that at the time, but it just slowly began to seep in all areas of my life, and I began to use people pleasing. Because if I could please people and I could make them happy, then everyone would be happy, right? But unfortunately, that's not the truth.
No,
and
not even remotely.
No. And in my marriage, it affected my marriage in negative ways. And I began to try to control everything around me, because I just wanted to protect my children. And so I would think ahead of all, what if, and then I would try to fix. And I'm telling you, it was exhausting. And mentally, it affected me so much that it began to destroy relationships. And in my marriage, there was so much arguing and mistrust, because from the very beginning, I really didn't feel like he loved me. And I felt like he was going to leave me. That was not the case. But in my mind, I was thinking these thoughts all the time. And eventually that wall began to divide me and him. And after 17 years of marriage, because I was so mentally distraught, I began to reach out to a male friend that I grew up with, and had an emotional affair. And I'm telling you, for a person that loved God and had a relationship with God, it almost destroyed me because of the guilt and the shame, which are more walls that I built up. And but then after 23 years of marriage, it ended in divorce. And I again was just going down, down, down. And it affected me, my heart, my feelings, my emotions. It affected my mind. It affected my spiritual relationship with God. And it began to affect my health too.
Oh,
And
definitely.
it does. And which this is another story, but I've had breast cancer. And, our trauma can affect our health.
Absolutely.
So, but finally, after I just really felt like I couldn't take it anymore and started having feelings of actually ending it all. One night, I just told God, if you'll just help me, then I will not breathe another breath without asking you first. And I'm in it. And I'm telling you, immediately, I slept better that night than I had ever slept. I woke up the next morning and began a process of keeping my mind focused on Him in everything that I did. And I did go through counseling, found a great Christian counselor who helped me learn how to use my mind and develop my critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
Which
Short
was
supply these days. So that
Yes.
is one. The Lord says, you have not because you ask not. And I believe that my relationship with Him has dispensed with subtlety. And so when I say to Him, my discernment meter has been beat to death, so I need yours. And He will do it. He will do it because that's not something He would deny us. He's not going to deny you
No.
the healing of that overthinking of, look at that cascade of trauma over that comment when you were little, and it's taking our thoughts captive to Him.
Right. And, truth says that I made a lot of bad choices in my life. Not all of them aren't like huge, bad, like negative things or anything like that. But I was so living in my emotions and not able to use my critical thinking that it's just easy not to make really good choices when that's happening. And I love to help people recognize that, if they're in that same position. So I love that I can share that now, that we need to trust God, and His wisdom and go to Him to help heal our minds. It's so important that we work on healing our minds.
Absolutely.
But, through everything that I went through, I learned that the most important thing is that God wants relationship with us, and not just a church relationship, not just what we've learned about church in the past or religion. He never wanted that. He wants us to have just like this type of relationship, sit down, talk to me, share everything with me. And he is so loving. And I just, I can imagine when I talk to Him, I imagine sitting with Him, talking to Him, and it has just totally changed my life. 2 years ago, when I I found an old bucket list. And there was only one thing on it that I hadn't done. Well, there was two things, but one of the things I couldn't do because it was traveling overseas and it just wasn't going to be possible at that time. But the only thing left was to write a book. And so I thought, hey, I have time now, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. So I began to just write. And even now, when I go back and I read my book, I think, oh, wow, that's really good. And then I realize I wrote it, but it wasn't me, it's God, because he taught me things and showed me things through this book, and it has been a total transformation in my life, going through that process. He brought the women that are in the book. We met, you mentioned Compel, and some of them I met through Compel, and their stories in the book, we all have different stories, but God met us all and changed our lives. But it really is, the main thing is about those walls. It's about that. I didn't know, but one of the walls that I came to finally, it had the big word PRIDE written across it. It's not a coincidence that I is right in the middle of that word. But I thought, oh no, not me. I'm not prideful. But all the things that were going on in my mind, the controlling, the fixing, that was me trying to do what was God's job.
And people talk about how when people sit there and they kind of put themselves down, or they kind of do these things, as well as like the controlling things, that they are actually truly shining a spotlight on themselves when we do these kind of things, as opposed to what we think in our mind that we're less, but we're not. Whenever it's always a constant conversation about me, my, I,
Well, he didn't show me that wall at first. He gave me some time to get through some other walls before I saw that one. But I didn't see that wall until I was writing the book. But I'm telling you, it was like he said, Darla, I knocked down the walls, but I can't knock this one down, because it's going to crush you if you're standing that close to it. You're going to have to get out of the way. And, it's like, I thought, I need to get out of the way. I need to get myself out of the way if I'm going to really see what God wants to do in my life. And I did. And it's different now. When I make decisions, I don't just make a decision. I ask God, is this where you want me to go? And starting the Oh So Free Ministry, I was never going that way. And it came about with a conversation with one of the women that are in the book. And, just in a very short time, women just started coming from everywhere, from all over the world. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful because that's me. I love relationship, and I want to show other women that the most important relationship is with Jesus. If we have that relationship and we work on that relationship, all the other relationships will fall into place.
I mean, he says the 2 commandments, greatest commandments, love him with all our heart, mind, body, and soul, and then love our neighbor as ourselves, which is the people in our house, the people we're in relationship with, wherever that may be, work, whatever. So I couldn't agree more. The Lord, when he asked me to do this originally in regard to writing my book, I thought, okay, maybe it's just for me. And so, okay, I'm okay with that. So I commenced the writing back that 10 years ago, but then there was this gap, and then I went through the divorce, and then I was on my face before him, realizing that ultimately he always has been and always will be my actual provider.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, all right, I got more into it, and I got, 40, 60,000 words rocking and rolling. And that's when Compel came into the picture. And then he was like, okay, you've been obedient to this part of the process, but no, it's not just for you. If what you've been through is going to work together for good and comfort somebody else, we need you to finish this. We need to get it across the finish line, whatever that looks like. And every single piece of this, me finding Bob as a coach, was so divine appointment. Every little bit. I have been told by my writing coaches that what I want to do, the name of the book, the cover, they said, you need to not get married to all that because they're going to change it all. And I'm like, well, I get that you guys are telling me this is how it's always been done, but there is nothing about my process anyway that has not been original and barrier breaking. So I know for a fact the Lord knows who my agent is, who my publisher is. He's the one that gave me the vision for the title and the cover. So I don't sit here worrying or having anxiety about how it's going to come to fruition. I just know it will, because he didn't
Yes.
ask me to do this for it to just stay this pile of papers, because I'm old school and that's what I do.
Yes. Yes.
In my, over in my little office area here. So, yeah, I see in the steps that you talk about exactly the same things, is that the first person all of this is for is us. And then we can see, I think, more clearly at that point, how it's going to get worked for others. And it is such a oh so free moment.
Yeah, that name, that was a crazy thing too. We had several names, obviously, and I think I warred over the name. I was under so much stress just about that name more than anything, not even writing the book. I wasn't. I'm like you about the book. It just kind of happens the way it's supposed to happen. And that name, I was so stressed about it. And, I kept putting in names because, you have to go through the process with that to see who else has the name and all of that. And none of the names would work. And then we got this one, and it just said it. I mean, it's not that we're free immediately when we accept Jesus Christ. He frees us, and we're going to have the last chapter of our book is going to be a never-ending chapter of total success. It's going to be great. But I just knew. I knew that when I said that name, it's not that I'm not free. I am free, but I want to be oh so free. And so that's where that came from.
Well, we're humans. And if you look at how he phrases a lot of the scriptures that are comforting and are healing, like do not be afraid, or these various things, it all lends itself to the fact that he knows we're human, and he knows we're like that, and that we have emotions. He has emotions. The character of God is beautiful and loving.
Yes.
And so he knew in advance that we were going to go back to what's comfortable occasionally. So the freedom is definitely there upon our salvation, upon that relationship with Jesus. But we go back and pick up the chains and kind of rattle them around a little bit sometimes. And so he's ready for that for us. And that is why I think, like you said, some people's story may need to get written in a journal that they keep at home, and that's good. But others need to put it out there. And trust me when I say my first book is now, the genre has switched to memoir, and the healing and most of that will be coming in the second book. But there are people still alive that I'm talking about in there. And so that's a whole thing. But he has been faithful to show me, the right people for putting this together, and to understand that it's the truth. I don't have to worry about that. What is happening and what is in here is the truth. And so we're gonna do this. And I just know the agent, the editor, the publishers, everybody will come together, and it will come together like he plans. And that is a freedom. Yeah. Yeah.
When you talked about going back, we do that. Yes, we do that often. But another thing that we do is we sit by the wall. Sometimes we're so comfortable because we've done this pattern all our lives that we pull out our lawn chair and we get our little drink and our umbrella and we sit there because it's comforting. But we will never experience the story that God wrote for us. We will never experience that power of what is on the other side of that wall. We have to let the wall come down. We say, oh, I would like to do this or I would like to do that. But if we don't step out of the way and let him crumble that wall, we can never go forward. And it's not easy after that point. I don't want people to think that, oh yeah, the wall comes down and then we're oh so free. No,
Puppies and rainbows.
it's the rebel. The rebel is still there because the wall, and we got to climb over the rocks, and we got to climb through all, walk through all the dust. But the thing this time is that Jesus is with us, holding our hands, lifting us over the rocks, walking through there and teaching us things along the way so that we will be stronger and we can serve him, but also serve each other the way that he intended for us to serve each other.
Yes. I think of that too, because through COVID, I had a lot of relationships fall by the wayside. And at first I would talk to the Lord about that. I was like, is the common denominator is clearly me. So is there something I need to do differently? I need to change. Mm-hmm. Or was it just that, okay, this is what needs to happen. And this is the growth you need to have. And I didn't want to be isolating or anything like that. My little walls around me. Instead, he was just showing me that, sometimes when we're in obedience with him and we're moving forward, the people around us who haven't stepped into that are annoyed because we're kind of, it bugs them that we are doing that. Not that we're sitting there judging them or shaming them. We're just so excited that we are free and we are moving forward in obedience finally. Not that I didn't drag my feet into that. And so it just has helped me open my eyes. It doesn't make them a bad person. It just means that they may not be one of the relationships that are getting to crawl over the rubble with me.
That's right. That's right. And we can have, unless they're obviously trauma-ridden relationships, sure. we meet all kinds of people along the way. And, in Oh So Free, we have a no shame policy. So people can come in and they tell their stories. Now, sometimes they want to write about their stories because we have so many opportunities for women to write also and learn to write. But sometimes I have to have these kind of conversations and say, I don't know, do you want to tell that? Do you want to tell that part of your story? And sometimes we don't tell it. We tell just what we need to tell, to get the point across. But I can kind of sense when the person is not ready to tell the story. And especially like you were talking, there are people that are living that may not have such, if they were brought into the story, it wouldn't be so pretty for them. And in my book, I tell what I need to tell. I had many people look at the book. I had people that were there at the time, even pastoral staff that was there at the time, to read that section of what happened, because I didn't want to look like I was pointing fingers. I wanted to tell the story, but and take full ownership, because it was me. It was me that made certain choices. But also by not telling all the story, people don't really know all the time how much trauma that was involved. But that's okay with me, because God told me it's okay.
If that's what your story is supposed to roll, like,
I'm not shaming you. I'm not shaming you. And I had to learn that it doesn't matter. It does matter what other people think. It does matter. And feel. But I took great strides in making sure that that the story that I was telling was about me and what I needed to change, and that it's a working process. It's still a working process, and I'm so lucky to have all the women that I do that surround me to help me with accountability. We have a great board of directors, and it's just wonderful. Over the past 5 years, the relationships that I've built with women, because I didn't have that before. Honestly, I did not have that before, because there was a trust issue there. Now I have women that I trust, I look up to spiritually, from all over the world, that invest in me, invest in the ministry, and fly here. I live in Oklahoma, so they fly from from other places to Oklahoma, and we have retreats. It's great to be able to hug someone's neck that you just have a conversation with this, like on Zoom or we have Teams. It's wonderful. It's been the most wonderful experience in my entire life. And I'm looking forward to what we're going to be doing in 2024.
Excellent. Well, this is awesome. You went through even, the question about the walls was going to be, so you covered all of that. This was beautiful. I love when it can just have this natural flow of transparency that we get to have, because that's what I honestly believe is how the Lord is going to use it, and how much I expose or say. My writing coaches have talked to me a lot about that as long as there is truth, and then my accountability for how any particular situations or what have you. So I look forward to that process with the people around me as well. One of the ways that I end every episode of my podcast is by asking individuals, and I have had 23-year-olds all the way up to Bob, who I think is a couple years older than me. I ask them for a nugget. And I know it can be hard because we have a lot of them, but like the one thing that you wish you had known sooner, or that somebody had told you sooner, that you now know that you'd like to share.
I think it is that it doesn't matter how much you know from growing up in church. I memorized so many scriptures, just in girls' clubs at church. It's not what it's about. You can be a person that just today you walk into the presence of God in your heart, in your prayer, and that relationship overrides everything that the world can teach you. And I feel like the nugget is that I wish that I had been taught more about the scripture, what Jesus was trying to teach through the scripture to help me with my everyday life, the choices that I made, and how those scriptures help you through that process. I didn't know any of that. And now as an adult, obviously, and since I started asking God, to help me with each day, I can just take one verse and apply that to my life over the week or the month, however long that is. And it's life-changing. And because the word is real, the word is living. And inside of you, that word can just totally transform your life.
That's awesome. I mean, I had this friend, she was a pastor's wife, and she was like a grandma to my daughter. Her grandkids lived somewhere else. And my daughter would go stay the night with them, like whenever I had a date night. I'm divorced now, but whatever. Anyway, she was so cute. My daughter was in Awana's, Cubbies, and they would teach them scriptures. They would kind of massage them so that they weren't like these 5 sentences long or whatever. And my daughter would come home and they would say she had memorized 9 that night. And I was like, what? She's 3. And my daughter spoke very well by then. She was an only child, and she really did have a good vocabulary, but I was like, what? And she sat me down and she said, you know what? She goes, I don't know if Maya can quote any of those to you now, but she goes, they've passed over her brain. She has said them. She has had them go over her heart. Yes. And yes, I get how you don't want it to be just memorize this stuff. You want them to understand how do you apply that, both in the expressing of the gospel to others, but also for your own choosing, your own processes of how to live a righteous life. So I love that. I think that's a great nugget. I think a lot of people get hung up and start saying, I don't want to go back to church. They're hypocrites, or they're all about religion and processes and procedures. Yes. And I think that if more people understood that isn't how Jesus intended it at all, that if you look at how he did carry out his relationships when he was here on earth, that is how he wants us to be, breaking bread at each other's home, you know,
Right.
sitting down and really understanding relationship with him, but also relationship with others. And so I think that's
I love that.
yeah. Well, I just have had a blast. I am
Well, thank you,
so
Michelle.
honored that I get to be your first podcast. Woo!
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm honored that you invited me, but even more that it was a relationship type thing, because now I know that you're in Oh So Free. And so when you comment, I'll know who you are. Because, you know, when you have over 1,000 women in there, you know, it's hard to know who everybody is.
Sure.
But I love when I get the opportunity to meet someone and to get to share, and that now I know a lot more about you, and I'm excited about your book, and we'll be able to help you share that, you know, in our group. So this is great.
Well, I appreciate it. This has been awesome. And you will probably be the episode will probably come out in February or March. And then I'll be winding down my first season and then heading into the second one. And so I'm really excited about what I've learned from all of you. So this has been great. I want to thank you all for coming to class today. If you want to connect with Darla, all of her information will be in the podcast notes. And she's on all the social media platforms, and Oh So Free is so fabulous. So ladies, if you want to connect there, you can catch me in there periodically, leaving comments too. So I
Yes.
want to thank you so much for coming to class. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to have her here and for you all to get to hear from her. And you can go get her book. Just say hello. Really good stuff. And I want to thank you so much for coming to class, and class dismissed.